Our next presenter is Jarrod Steeg. Jarrod is originally from Washington State. He began fisheries work as an undergrad, working with NOAA, and then spent time collecting Alaskan fisheries data. He then made his way down south for this program. He spent his time at Scripps focusing on data analysis and science communication, and he hopes to then advance the scientific community's understanding of marine science and improve the way in which these discoveries are communicated. The title of his project today is Citizen Scientist View of Marine Protected Areas.
Thank you, Samantha. I actually had to make a last-minute change to that after talking with my partners that I worked with. We like the term community science better as a more inclusive term, so sorry about that. Anyway, thank you. So anyway, actually I started my project basically when we first got here in the summer, when I first met with Angela Kemsley from Wild Coast. She came to us in the summer to talk to us about a program that they run down there. And she's actually the statewide coordinator of the community science program called MPA Watch. Now, MPA Watch is a network of programs that uses community science to collect human use data in and around marine protected areas. And marine protected areas, or MPAs, are basically underwater state parks. And so, here in California, we have an integrated network of 124 of them across the coast. So MPA Watch collects this data by training volunteer groups in local areas and having them run surveys on designated transects. These surveys and data sheets used by MPA Watch are scientifically vetted, and so that they've been able to collect very high quality data over the last 8 years of their study. And actually, since the beginning of MPA Watch and as of last week, 24,407 surveys have been submitted to the program so far. So, in 2022, the Department of Fish and Wildlife will be conducting a management review of the MPA network here in California. And we believe that the MPA Watch data that has been collected could be a vital and invaluable resource into better effectively implementing adaptive management. So I partnered up with Wild Coast and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to conduct a preliminary analysis on this data and to see where it might be possible to be used in management. And we wanted to hit a few main goals in this. And the first was to identify the data composition, or what is there. So in MPA Watch and in their surveys, they collect data on 70 different categories of human use. And so being able to identify the compositions of these utes in each MPA could really help us identify the unique makeup of each MPA and its value. And the second was to look at any trends in the data and what's been going on, or what stands out. So they've been collecting this data for over 8 years now, and 400 million people are estimated to make beach visits, or there are 400 million beach visits every year in the state of California. So having a better understanding of where these people are going and at what trends and frequencies of time of year could really help us improve our management strategies. And lastly, other usages. So we came up with 2 usages that we wanted to bother about in this study. And the first was education. So we believe that understanding these usages in our MPAs and sharing that information with the public can greatly increase just marine protected area awareness and the value of these areas for everyone in California. And then also on the enforcement side. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife has to manage 840 miles of coastline here in California, and that could be a pretty tough task. So giving them this human use information could greatly help them with allocation of resources in protecting these areas. And so we jumped into this, and I decided to also use our statistical software to run this analysis and began my love-hate relationship with coding. So, yeah. Anyway, to make this a feasible study, we did have to set a few parameters for the timeline of this project. And the first one was what MPAs we wanted to look at. So we decided to pick Southern California protected areas. So this is the area between the border of Mexico and up north to Point Conception. And in this area, there are 17 MPAs that MPA Watch monitors and 10 different control areas. Now, most of these control areas are usually areas right next to the MPA, but are not in the protected area. And since this also was a preliminary study on just what the data looks like in these MPAs, we actually decided to drop these control areas and solely focus on the 17 MPAs. So the first thing, or the first categories we wanted to look at, were consumptive and non-consumptive usages. So MPA Watch divides all of their activities recorded into these categories. Now, consumptive usages are defined as anything that has take in it. And take has a very specific definition by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife of any hunting, pursuing, catching, capturing, or killing of any marine resources or animals. And so these activities you're going to find are a lot of like the fishing, tide pool collecting, any type of harvesting in the MPAs. And the other category we have is the non-consumptive usages, so anything that doesn't involve take. And this is where most of our beach activities and recreational activities are included, such as sunbathing, whale watching, all that kind of stuff. So we actually calculated an average for both of these types of uses based on the number of surveys inside each MPA and the length of each transect. And we graphed them north from south to see if there's any regional trends in human uses of the MPAs. So we didn't find too much regional trends. However, we do see that the two biggest ones we have are Laguna Beach and Crystal Cove, which are actually side-by-side MPAs in the Orange County area. And the Orange County beaches are some of the most popular ones we have. Another thing that we can draw from this is that consumptive usages make up less than 1% of all the average use inside of the MPAs. Which is great because, I mean, the main reason MPAs are designated is to help limit and reduce take in those areas. So the next thing we wanted to look at was a better look at what these large portions of non-consumptive uses are. And so we decided to do comparisons of that composition. So MPA counts 25 different types of non-consumptive uses, and when plotted all together, kind of makes it a bit crowded. But one thing we can draw from this is that activities such as the bottom green of beach recreation and that dark green section of offshore recreation make up a bulk of MPA activity. So this recreation is a term they use. It's a non-descriptive category. It includes just people hanging out on the beach, those sunbathers and kind of stuff like that, where it's just where people go and play. And in the Southern California MPAs, those two categories make up between 50 and 90% of usage in the different MPAs. And although this is kind of pretty, but it doesn't paint the best picture of what the uses and the unique aspects of each MPA are. So we decided to narrow it down a little bit farther and look at the top 5 non-consumptive and non-recreational usage inside each MPAs. And so we took that and we made up some graphics kind of like this. And so what we have is, sorry, this is the wrong one. And so we took the top 5 non-recreational activities inside each MPAs and plotted them in an area so we can compare them to different MPAs along the coast. And so here we have a few of them up in the Los Angeles area and Santa Barbara. So some we can see here, like Campus Point, SMCA, are dominated by surfing, and the same with Point Dune as well. And so these can be useful tools to inform people on these activities and where they might be able to go to enjoy specific activities they like. But you also see that there are differences in our MPAs. So down to Abalone Cove, there's a lot higher percentage in tide pooling. And tide pooling and other activities, and surfing is actually not a part of the general popular activities in the area. So this is a great tool for public education and management. The public is going to be able to pick what MPAs are able to best suit their needs, and management agencies can understand what types are valuable in those areas and kind of adapt their management accordingly. And finally, we also wanted to look at those consumptive uses and break them down a bit farther as well. So here we have the top 5 consumptive usages by season in Point Dune MPA. And we decided to break it down by season so that not only do we have that total or top take represented, but we also have a little bit of a time frame of when they're coming up in the areas. And this is probably going to be mostly a tool for enforcement in these areas. So as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Fish and Wildlife has the daunting task of patrolling all of California's coastline. And so graphs like this can really help them not just see where take's happening the most, but possibly be able to identify specific illegal take activities happening inside MPAs, finding when they're most prevalent, and then allocating the resources to that way to make the most efficient way possible. And so along with these graphs of consumptive and non-consumptive, I've compiled a report that I'm going to be giving to Wild Coast and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to help them get an idea of how beneficial this Wild Coast data can be and to help push further analysis of this data along the road towards that 2022 management review. So Wild Coast does have a lot to offer, but there is one thing that is a challenge of them for painting that grand picture of total human use, and that's going to be survey rates. So every survey that MPA Watch has recorded represents a snapshot of human use of one day and on one MPA transect. And with multiple MPA transects inside each MPA, and this study going over years, that actually represents a very small percentage of the total time these activities have been going down. So I think we have some of our highest sampling rates are up to 13%, and which is relatively small. And having these small sampling rates could limit the ability of MPA Watch data to provide accurate depictions of these uses in California coast. But fortunately, there's a very simple solution of how we can improve these rates, and in doing so, the value MPA Watch has to offer. And that's to spread the word and get more people involved in community science programs like MPA Watch. And to do this as well, I made a promotional video to help get more people involved. So I'm going to share that with you now.
Imagine there's an area of land, and I told people they could go do whatever they wanted there. What do you think they would do? Unfortunately, the answer is usually that they would destroy it. So we realized this a really long time ago, that we needed to save areas of land. But it wasn't until very recently that we realized we needed to do the same thing for the ocean. So we created this network of marine protected areas. Marine protected area is an area of the coast or ocean that helps to protect the biodiversity and abundance of all of the critters that live there. They're pretty much like state parks, but underwater. They're built around ecologically important areas, things like fish breeding grounds, rocky reefs, kelp forests, also around areas of economic importance or of cultural importance. MPA Watch was created in 2008, and it was implemented originally to answer the research question, are MPAs working or are they just paper parks? MPA Watch is a network of programs that support healthy oceans through community science by collecting human use data in and around our protected areas.
One of the really cool things about MPA Watch is that it really gets volunteers out into the field conducting actual science. And not only are they conducting research, collecting data, inputting that data, but it's data that's going to actually be used to make change. That makes volunteers feel really empowered. So if a volunteer wanted to get involved, there are MPA Watch programs all up and down the coast, and they'd have to go through a simple training. And once the volunteer is all trained up, they would be able to go do an MPA Watch survey whenever they wanted. MPA Watch is an incredible program. If you like long walks on the beach, you're going to like MPA Watch.
We have two different variations of MPA Watch protocol. One is a land-based survey, and it documents mostly human activity onshore, inside and outside the MPAs. The boat-based surveys really focus on any boating activity out on the water and then onshore fishing. So the real focus is to collect data, human use data of what's going on inside and outside the MPAs. But in that process, it provides an opportunity for volunteers to come out on the boat with me and interact with nature. That's the real moment where I see that connection, that realization of how interconnected we all are. And we are co-creating the situation we're living in. The seeds of connection that get planted in that process with my volunteers hopefully will breed a deeper sense of stewardship and connection to those areas and to our planet and to each other and to our community.
A lot of people are looking for a way to get involved to help save the coast and ocean or get involved in science, and they just don't know how. And MPA Watch is a very easy way for them to get out, collect data, and actually make a difference. To get involved, visit mpawatch.org and find volunteer opportunities near you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone in my capstone committee, Angela, Stephen Wirtz, and Chase James, my PhD mentor, for sticking it with me and putting up with some of my drafts. And then, of course, everyone here for supporting us. So, thank you. Great. No questions? Yeah. I'm out of time. So.